Dr. LePage, thank you for being here today. Please tell us about who you are. What department are you in? What is the position you hold? And how long have you been with San Francisco State University?
I'm in the special education department here in the College of Education. I've been here for 11 years. I just got promoted to full professor. Before coming to San Francisco State, I was at Stanford for a couple of years in a grant project where a committee called the Committee on Teacher Education looked at teachers and what they needed to know before they finished their credential programs. And before that, I was at George Mason University in Virginia, and I worked in an interdisciplinary program and a master's program for practicing teachers. And what we did was we brought teachers in from schools, and they finished their master's program. It was called the Educational Institute for Educational Transformation, and we looked at the programs were about social justice, and they came in teams, and they worked through the 2 years in the program as teams, and then went back and worked to transform their schools and their school districts. Before that, I got a degree in special education from in a joint program from the University of California, Berkeley and San Francisco State University. And before that, I was a special education teacher for 11 years.
Professor, what are your interests? Please describe the critical issues in education that motivate you and the impact those issues have had on your work.
Well, I think there are a couple of main interests that I've focused on over the years. The main interest I have, I think, is in teacher education. I'm specifically or most interested in moral issues related to teachers' dispositions. And that could include how teachers think about or look at or interact with students, and how they look at how students are included in schools, not only special needs students, but students who are different in a lot of different ways, students who feel on the outside of schools and don't feel included in for whatever reason, how they're brought into the community of schools, so teachers' attitudes towards learning, and how they respond to learning, and once they become learners, I believe that they can kind of, take over from there, because then they become good teachers, I believe. Also, teacher communities. I believe that they need to be collaborative and also supportive. So how do we develop good communities in schools, good supportive communities? And how does that impact children's learning in those schools? I believe that, if you really want to have a good job, who has good jobs? They're people who have enjoy working with different people. And so this is what I really look at in teacher education. But there's other things that I look at in teacher education, like curriculum and pedagogy. Like at Stanford, we looked at what teachers need to know. So I've looked at a lot of different issues in teacher education. I'm also interested in kids with autism as far as special education. I have a child myself with high-level autism, and I work in mild to moderate special education. So the kids that I work with or have worked with in the past have mild disabilities. A lot of them are included in general education already, so I'm very interested in how they're included. And high-level autism, I'm interested in socialization and also identity development, especially for middle school and high school children. So I'm interested in older children, where a lot of people in special education are interested in early development. I'm interested in children's older development. I'm also interested in kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, or kids from backgrounds who have lived in poverty, or who've had traumatic experiences when they're children. And one of the books I wrote, or my dissertation actually, was on resiliency, women from disadvantaged backgrounds who achieved highly in academics. But I just recently wrote a book about how to teach children with autism, with high-level autism. And in both of those studies, both of those books, I did interviews. I did interviews of women who achieved highly in academics with my dissertation, and I did interviews of families, both parents and teenagers, who had autism, or parents of children with autism, for my last book. So those are some of my interests in research.
Dr. LePage, can you please take a moment and tell us about the research methodologies that you have used and why?
I'm considered mostly qualitative. I'm definitely considered the qualitative person. A lot of times with research, I do a lot of interviews. Interview is the methodology that I prefer. I also like to do observations. Most of the students that I work with actually do mixed method studies. So a lot of them do surveys and qualitative research along with it. So there's some quantitative and qualitative, all that type of stuff. But I like to do qualitative because for me it just allows for deeper questions, the why questions. I feel that it lets me get to analyze deeper. There's usually a lot of data to analyze, but it allows me to kind of really look at more data and to come up with the why question. I think I can analyze that type of data. When you get into more practical things like how do you solve the problems, those actually are the more difficult questions, I think. Some of the more theoretical questions that are really kind of more why questions for me are easier, actually. And some of the problem-solving questions, which are also, I think, theoretical to some extent, and also those are the most difficult. The ones that you can actually kind of test with a hypothesis and you use quantitative data, those are actually pretty easy, but I think they're very limiting. But I think most people use mixed method studies, so a lot of times people will have a quantitative person and a qualitative person, or somebody who can do a little bit of both. But usually I'm usually the person who does the qualitative, and I like to do qualitative analysis.
Professor, what is your experience working with doctoral students? What types of roles have you performed in the EDD program, such as teacher, chair, member of committee?
I've actually had quite a bit of experience with doctoral students. The special education program here at San Francisco State has a joint doctoral program between San Francisco State and Berkeley, and I've been here for 11 years. So I've had a number of doctoral students here at San Francisco State. I don't know, maybe 5, 6, or 7. So I've had that. I've had a number of them I've been the chair for. And then I've actually had somebody in the EDD program. So I've had somebody here. I've also had doctoral students in other universities too. I had an EDD doctoral student I was chair for at CSU East Bay. I want to call it Hayward, but East Bay. And also when I was at George Mason, there was a doctoral program there too. And so I had a couple of doctoral students there. And I actually had one at University of Maryland when I was there too. I was on her committee, I wasn't her chair. But sometimes you can be on people's committees from outside the university. So that's possible for you too, maybe. So that was really interesting. So I've actually been on a number of committees for doctoral students. And a lot of them are different. I've been on EDD committees. I've been on special ed committees. I was on an ed tech committee because I've kind of interdisciplinary. I consider myself interdisciplinary. At George Mason, I was on this Institute for Educational Transformation that was really more of a general ed program for secondary and elementary. I was here in special ed. I have a master's in educational technology. So I've, and I've also taught in secondary and elementary education programs in other universities like San Jose State and I can't even remember now. Oh, San Diego State. I taught in the ed tech program where I got my master's. So I've actually worked in higher education since like the late 80s. So I've actually been in higher education for a long time. As far as this program is concerned, I've been done a number of things. I've besides being on committees, I was on a search committee once. They were looking for an assistant professor. Unfortunately, we lost the position, which was too bad. But that was an interesting. And I've done admissions and I've done things like that. So I've worked with them on their administration, different parts of the program. Gone to their faculty meetings and worked with them on their evaluation on their program, things like that. So I've not taught any of their classes, which I'm disappointed about. But I've taught in a lot of doctoral level classes in my program in special education. So I have been working with the program, and I'd like to get some more students. So I'm hoping maybe there's some students out there that have some similar interests as mine.